want to go on the attack against trolls of your favorite player. But to do that, you need a good defense, and we choose NordVPN. They are our protection against cyber cutters or when some board has geo-blocked a great clip. NordVPN will help you get through the straight bat of any rights restrictions so that you can watch all the cricket you want. We aren't always happy with the pitches that we're on. Sometimes we just need a change. NordVPN can drop in a new service to your location so that your IP address is always ready to score. So if you need to get around the internet's rules, select NordVPN. And so they can do things like help you watch a game on a cheaper stream in another country. So give NordVPN the ball and let them penetrate the vast internet issues you might have. So if you need a VPN, certainly go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber, K-I-M-B-E-R, to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan, plus 4 additional months for free. Also, you can receive 20 gigabytes of a Sally data voucher as well. The link to all of this is in the show notes. Protect your computer like the fastest, nastiest, scariest bowler in the world is coming for it with NordVPN today. That's nordvpn.com/KIMBER. Go Nord today. Welcome to the Scoreboard. I am Jared Kimber. Morning, everyone. I've got a lot to unpack about this Nepal-South Africa game. I haven't been so fascinated by a game in a long time. I watched it the first time and I was like, oh, well, I want to talk about this. And then thanks to MV Play, I could go back and I could watch every single ball of it again. So I've now watched it multiple times. And some balls I've watched like 5 and 6 times. I could write like a 10,000 word essay on this article, on this game. And it's not, like that would not be hard for me to do. There are so many fascinating things. So one of the early ones is, of course, maybe even at the toss, where they decide to rest Maharaj, having not seen the previous game, apparently, when the ball was spinning sideways. Now, I get it. It's very clear they want a 4-seamer, 1-spinner option. In New York, that was absolutely fine. St. Vincent looks the spinniest of spinning wickets. I'm still angry at the Dutch for not bowling Pringle more. Or certainly not bowling him earlier anyway. So that was the first mistake they made. But you go back and you have a look. The early boundaries that South Africa got were luck. I think one was a leg by, and another one was an inside edge back past the stumps. But finally, Reza Hendricks puts the tiniest bit of pressure on. He backs away and he hits one over cover for 4. And the next ball, Nepal will make a mistake. And you're watching it and you think, okay, well, that's what you do. Just put some pressure on them and get your boundaries and move forward. That's not what they did. Even when they got terrible balls at times, they just looked for singles. The amount of like short balls down the leg side that they tried to turn for 1, or half volleys outside our stump that they were just chipping. It was really, really bizarre watching them go about that. And to be fair, Nepal has a great attack for this kind of pitch. You know, 2 leg spinners. They had a low slidey seamer as well. They had finger spin options and everything else. And they bowled okay, but you go back through it, they dropped 2 absolute sitters. And almost dropped Klaasen as well. They did drop Klaasen about 4 times, but he managed to hold on to that one. But they didn't bowl brilliantly. Sandeep did. But there was still plenty of balls from him down the leg side as well. He overpitched and they didn't really put any pressure back on. It was really a bizarre point. We saw some other things with South Africa's batting as well. That, you know, the Marco limitation. This was a tough situation to come out as a new batter. And he just looked like a number 9, right? And at number 7, they were lucky that, again, they managed to keep him out of the middle for such a long time. But Stubbs, all respect to Stubbs for his innings, because, you know, Reza Hendricks will probably be seen as the player who gave them the biggest chance of winning. But Stubbs is the reason that they actually forced it to be run a ball. He came out with energy. He was looking to force the pace. He was putting pressure back on them. He was running 2s. He was doing all the things that you expect to happen in cricket and don't always happen, right? It was absolutely just normal good batting from that point of view. Really good work from Stubbs all the way through there. So he allowed them to kind of not get out of it, but at least get a score. But there's one other thing worth mentioning here. This is why you could write an entire essay about this. This is how South Africa bat, right? The biggest difference here was the pitch was a little bit tougher. So instead of them trying to manufacture boundaries, they were waiting for mistakes. But they do try and bat within themselves for a long period of time, get themselves to so they never lose more than 4 wickets, because obviously that's when the tail sort of starts to come in. And you look at the way that they played, well, they were batting like a team who didn't really trust their number 7 or number 8 all that much, right? And there are bigger issues for South Africa here going forward, especially when it comes to batting, because it's the same thing we have seen in so many World Cups from them, is they want to bat within themselves. And in World Cup games, when the pressure is on, that is a much tougher thing than doing in a bilateral game, when you can get to, they could have been, what were they, 60 for 2 roughly around the 10 over mark in a bilateral game, and they still would have made 180 against this kind of a team, right? The freedom, and they would have gone on top and everything else. Maybe not 180 on this one, but certainly 140. This wasn't that kind of situation. The World Cup just changes the way that you bat, especially with South Africans and their order. Then let's go to the bowling. This is fascinating. Rabada finally works out the length to bowl on these pitches after being in New York for a week and bowling the wrong length. He gets here and he bowls a perfect over to start the game. Back of a length, fast, try and hit this sunshine. And of course, he gets a simple catch of Ashik, and it drops it. Like an absolutely simple catch. But you go back and you have a look at just how well South Africa were bowling early on. I mean, Jansen was all over them. Swinging the ball, when he did hit the pitch, they were terrified of it. Bartman, when he bowled as well, also did really, really well. They were completely on top, except for the fact that they couldn't break through, and Rabada had dropped that catch. Then you had Nortje come on for the 7th over with a long stop. Just loving this. The Neil Wagner fields for a T20 game. I love how we've got here so quick. But the big mistake that they had was not having the 2 spinners. And then the situation they found themselves in, where they didn't bring a spinner onto the 8th over. Did they not watch themselves bat? I'm pretty sure Sandeep's first ball spun 6 degrees, right? Tim Pringle bowled some balls that just ragged sideways as well. Rishi Sun took the wickets for Bangladesh. Like, there's so many signs here that this pitch is going to spin. Why would you keep Shamsi back to the 8th over? Why would you not try and slip in an over of Aiden Markram at this point, right? It just seemed to me like a really, really interesting thing. But one thing I would talk about is throughout this first, let's say, 7 overs, is just how often Nepal were looking for boundaries. It's so noticeable, moving across their stumps to flick it, backing away, trying to manufacture boundaries and everything. Now, the bowling was so good that they actually scored slower than South Africa, I think, in the power play. But they didn't bat like they were trying to. It's just that the balls were too good for them to do anything with. They really tried to put pressure back on. I was really, really impressed by what they were doing with all that sort of stuff. There was a ball that was bowled to Saar, and I think it was bowled by Anrit Nokia, where he bowls a half volley. And if that's a half volley on the pads at that point, South Africa probably would have tried to flick it for 1 or 2. And he just belts it over, I think it was over mid-wicket for 4 or 6. Just the difference of when there was a loose ball. And South Africa bowled way better than Nepal, as far as compared to bad deliveries. I mean, obviously the pitch play helped Nepal's attack a lot more. But when it came to the amount of bad deliveries that they bowled, South Africa didn't bowl anywhere near as many as Nepal. If you go back, they really were disciplined to put the ball in the right area again and again. Obviously, Shamsi was great, and that first over was really, really important, got them back. And then it takes until the 14th over for South Africa to go, do you know what? I think this is a wicket that might help spinners. You go back to the toss, and Aiden Markram is talking about... Wait, I've got it in front of me here. Aiden Markram is talking about... where is it? Keshav Maharaj is going to miss out for Ray Shamsi. He hasn't had much game time, so this is the last opportunity to get him some before the Super 8s. Right? It feels like they are not trying to win this game, and they are more looking at just making sure everyone gets a go. That's fine. You make that mistake early on, right? Then the game starts, and you have a part-time spinner available to you. I think they might have had a couple in this squad, if I'm not mistaken, as well. Is it Hendricks or Stubbs might bowl some part-time spin as well? There is a point at which you have to try it early on, especially when you don't get a wicket. So somewhere around the 5th over, and we've seen Markram bowl in the power play before. No one's saying he's a great bowler, but on this wicket, he could have done something. He certainly had to come on around the 7th over. And at that stage, they didn't have a wicket. So maybe they're thinking to themselves, we have to break through. Fine. But when Shamsi comes on the 8th over, surely that's the point when you take 2 wickets where you go, great, let's bring the part-timer on now because they won't be able to whack him. And we, at the very least, we can maybe cheat an over of 3 runs here. They just never did it. And it's really interesting. And of course, when he comes on, it's, they're almost out of the game at that point. In fact, at one stage, I think Nepal started the game 40-1. And at one stage, they got down to odds of 103. So 40-1 means if you put £1 on, you get £39 back plus your original pound. So, and 1.03 means if you put £1 on, you get 3 pence back plus your original pound. So you make a 3 pence profit per pound, right? That's how crazy the swings were in this game. And then Shamsi gets a wicket with a wide, right? Then bowls an absolute proper ball to Ashik and bowls him. And that's when it gets a lot more interesting because suddenly there's 2 new batters at the crease. And this is a difficult wicket to score on. I think we saw with the Bangladesh-Netherlands game as well. Like it's a tricky pitch at times. I thought was it Carr's 6? I think it was Carr, wasn't it? He smashed that 6. Incredible. After all those dot balls and all the pressure that had been building up. What a brilliant strike. But let's get down to the last 2 balls because Nepal had this game and didn't quite think it through. There's a big swing and a miss and Nepal weren't ready to run. And I don't know if there was a run there, right? But they weren't ready to run. And I think at that stage, you have to be really putting pressure on South Africa so that Quinton de Kock at the very least has to throw the ball. Think about it this way. If you had put pressure on, he might underarm back at the stumps. If he underarms back at the stumps and it hits the stumps, you're a chance of a run. And also, if he throws it back to Bartman with the gloves on, we've seen in this tournament before, Rizwan to Mohammad Amir and a few other occasions where keepers just under pressure struggle to get the ball back to the bowler, right? You have to put pressure on. So that's Nepal's first mistake. Then the next ball is credible. It's another, back of a length ball, quick. There's a big swing and a miss again. And QDK is completely onto it. And he throws it at the bowler's end. But of course, it hits the batter. And if it hadn't have hit the batter, unless it was going to hit the stumps, and I don't think it was, but unless it was going to hit the stumps, I actually think Nepal would have been fine here. In fact, they might have ended up with the winning runs. Because Batman wasn't awake at all at that point, right? Like you have a look at him. He was standing upright when that throw was coming in and it was coming low. He might have been able to get his hands low enough to stop it, but I don't think he would have taken it cleanly at that point. So it rebounds then to Klaassen, who's coming in from cover, who it couldn't have rebounded any more perfectly for him, right? That ball could have gone in any other direction. It could have just hit the batter and gone straight down. It could have gone on the other side. It could have gone up in the air, all these different things. And instead it goes straight to Klaassen. And he does a beautiful backhander and, of course, runs him out. Ridiculous luck by South Africa there off that last ball. And really unlucky for Nepal. They put themselves in a position to at least get that to a super over. And I think they probably should have done better than that. But what a fantastically, beautifully odd game of cricket that was. All right, let us get into the scoreboard. Oh my God, I need a minute. Obviously, USA Ireland. I don't know why we got the Irish flag there. I don't know if this was done on AI or not, but that is Ireland don't play under that flag because they're 2 different islands. Also, it must be I love this floating bat though. Big fan of that. Who is it? Is it Steve Smith, who sometimes does the floating bat, isn't it? But yeah, Ireland and Pakistan basically both screwed over there at the same time by that rain. Mostly Pakistan, if we're being honest. But and the Qudrat Khan Nizam was eventually disarmed, I suppose, if that is the case. That means that India and the USA are qualifying. So congratulations to the USA. They certainly deserved their chance. It's a bit of a shame that we didn't get the USA Ireland game just because I think it would have been a fascinating contest. Ireland was starting that as slight favourites, which I'm not sure was how I saw the game. But I think it would have been a really close game, and unfortunately we didn't quite get there. So that means that the Super 8 group so far, and we're not sure about Bangladesh, Netherlands, but we're pretty sure Bangladesh is going to get through, is India, Australia, Afghanistan, and one of those two sides. And then the other group is going to be United States, West Indies, South Africa, and Scotland or England. Probably more likely to be England now, unless one of those other games is run out. So by Sunday, more or less, we should know who the finalists are. We'll try and do a video on the main channel for Monday morning on all of this, but there we have it. And just have a look at the team maps in this World Cup so far in this tournament. So Nepal actually hadn't played all that much, of course. But you can see where their strength is certainly bowling spin in the middle overs, which we saw today. South Africa has actually been batting well in the middle overs, but remember that's on a very warped wicket that we have seen so far. Okay, so we went through my top of my head before. Let's go through the proper scoreboard analysis of this. You can see just scoring at a run of ball here. Looking back, I think it was Cricinfo wrote a report saying that South Africa didn't maximize their power play. I think that's kind of true. But if you also go back and have a look at it the way I have for the second watch sort of thing, you'll see that the other thing that happens is they don't maximize it when the spinners bowl bad balls either. So I don't think you can just blame this. They thought they were putting themselves into a pretty good position, and you can see that they still scored 8 runs and over off the last couple of overs as well. But it really is, Lamachani overs that cause them a lot of issues, especially early on. And then you get the extra pressure. So there are a couple of big overs here, but then once they start to lose wickets, they just never get into a position where they can score that good. And then Tristan Stubbs helps them just a little bit at the end. South African batters, Reza Hendricks, 43 of 49. I don't think he was one of the major culprits of people not taking bad balls, but I saw half volleys. I saw balls down the leg side to him that he was clearly trying to hit for singles that had to be hit for 4 or attempted hit for 4. Also, I don't think he was really putting a lot of pressure on the running between wickets either, but he got the runs. So, there's a lot of other guys that did not. And then Stubbs came in. It's a really good knock, this Stubbs. And it reminds me of the sort of thing of when you're sitting there and what's the best way to put it? I was going to say attacking batter, but I don't quite mean that. You're a high energy batter. It was almost the sort of innings you would see from a wicket keeper in the 90s, right? Where they were sitting there just going, come on, guys, we just need to put a little bit of pressure on them. But really well done from him. Kami, his 2 overs went for 6 runs, which is ridiculous. Lamachane, we can all have problems with him from moral perspectives, although he has been found, is he been found not guilty or is it overturned? I don't actually know what the final decision was in that. But he bowled beautifully without getting any wickets here. But the 4 wickets to Kushal Patel, really, really enjoyed him. And then a finger spinner as well, who took 3 wickets. Just for a minute, I thought he took a floating wicket there. But they, a couple of the batters, bowlers went for runs. Curran, bowled the 1 over and got hit. Interesting that they didn't bring him back on. But they're another one of these associate teams with just multiple options. All right, let's get down to the really fun one. Floating wicket here. That might be from the other one. You can see how consistent this start was, despite the fact that South Africa bowled really well. I think if you play back those first 6 overs again, even with the Markram mistake, I think South Africa probably averaged 2.5 wickets in those first 6 overs, which would have changed this game massively. But not being able to do that certainly put them on the back foot before Shamsi and Nortje. So Nortje's been their best bowler in this tournament. Shamsi came on and got a couple of wickets as well. But they actually responded really well to that, right? This is a brilliant period. And you can see why they went to Markram, not out of a position of, this wicket's spinning, we need a spinner on. They went to Markram out of desperation. And that just shows you how much Nepal were on top. But once Markram gets that wicket, this is a slowdown. Some of this is also, this bit in here, you go back and you look at it, it's a little bit of, this is when Nepal realized that they were expected to win and that the pressure just got to them. there was a freedom in this section, maybe not so much here, but certainly in here, where they were just like, oh no, we can, we're going to do this. This is when they realized it's probably coming down to the wire. And we've seen this with a couple of teams in this World Cup who are, not as experienced, or, not as experienced in major games, of, oh no, there's a thing happening here. Of course, Shamsi comes on, gets these 2 wickets, and then it's a bit of a free-for-all towards the end with that fantastic run out that we talked about before. Not fantastic in terms of skill, just fantastic in terms of entertainment. And this is the runs. Sheikh was absolutely brilliant, the way that he went about his batting. Again, very similar innings if you look at it to what to what Reza Hendricks did in terms of strike rate and everything else. But when you are chasing a total that isn't that high, you're putting yourself in a really good position. Really like the way he batted, looked for boundaries, got stuck at certain times, but when he was on top, hit that big 6 as well. There was some good stuff there. And Anil Saar, who I think I called Carl before, made 27 off 24. Again, a little bit like Stubbs, right? Just that little bit more energy, that big 6 that I was talking about earlier. And these 2 guys certainly went. But there was basically 4 batters who handled this wicket, which is really interesting. It wasn't quite like that for the last game. It looked like to me a tougher wicket than the Bangladesh Netherlands one was. It was a tough wicket to score on that one as well, but this one just seemed a little bit more. And then the bowlers, Aiden Markram, shall we? Rabada's second over went for a lot of runs. His first over was brilliant, as I said before. Should have got a wicket. Should have really won them the game. That would have taken Sheikh out completely, right? It gave them a huge chance to win that game. And then he came back on and it didn't work for him. I haven't heard anything that says he was injured. So I'm going to assume that he was yanked from the attack. I mean, at the moment, Nortje, Janssen, and Butman are bowling better than him, right? And by a distance. And Nortje got a little bit of tap later on as well, but certainly bowled brilliantly early on. But the truth is in here, right? That they probably needed to do that more. But I also, to get back to the point we were making before, you could see why they wouldn't. So what do we make of South Africa's tournament so far? They have won 4 from 4. There are times in tournaments where people don't trust South Africa because they're South Africa and everything else, and fine. But quite often they're playing good at that point. They're not playing particularly good cricket at the moment, are they? Rabada's not bowling well. I don't think Maharaj was bowling particularly well. Butman hasn't looked like the Butman of, SA20 and some of the other times I've seen him bowl before. I thought he's starting to bowl slightly better. Nortje looks completely back. And Janssen has bowled really good in patches, but brilliantly in patches, and a couple of times maybe not at his absolute best. So bowling I'm not too worried about, but the batting, it is weird. And this comes back to the thing we were talking about before. They want to bat in a way that conserves wickets and allows them to go big at the end. Is it just that they've been on pitches that haven't really allowed that? Or have they got a lot of guys who aren't really in peak form at the moment? It's so hard to tell because these wickets are fucking tough, right? And, you look at the South African one, the New York one, that's one kind of very tough wicket. And then you come here, this is a very different kind of tough wicket. I don't really know where to factor them in at the moment and how they're going. Anyway, and just one last thing before we get to the Uganda one, I wanted to quickly talk about, which is completely forgotten now. Oh yeah, just the final game in that group. So why can't I find it? Here we go. So Netherlands are playing Sri Lanka and Bangladesh are playing Nepal. Where are we? Yeah. So yeah, Netherlands are playing Sri Lanka and Bangladesh are playing Nepal. Now, I thought coming into this game, fair chance of what was going to happen here is that Netherlands going to struggle against Nepal just because that is quite often what happens when they go up against teams with really good spinning attacks. They've got a couple of players who can play spin, Engelbrecht and the captain, but they're not a brilliant team against that. So that's normal analysis. But then you look at it and you go, well, they're playing in St. Lucia, which generally helps seam bowlers. Now, Sri Lanka has still got some good seam bowlers. I'm not sure that Sri Lanka's batting looks any more informed than Netherlands batting does at the moment, right? And Netherlands have some good players as well. So that makes that a little bit more interesting. And then you come to the Bangladesh-Nepal game. Based on purely today, right? And I am going purely on today for this one. You would have to say that Nepal has a decent enough chance in that particular game. Like, I don't think you would say, based on that game today, that they have no chance of winning. It's on the same wicket again, so both of the teams will be used to it. We know it suits their bowling attack, whether they can make enough runs. But Bangladesh is not a team that also makes a whole ton of runs, right? So there is a big, big argument to say that that game is actually going to be far closer than we ever thought it was going to be. Or sorry, those two games. I still think Bangladesh qualify and not Nepal. But hey, let's see. Uganda and New Zealand today. This has been their tournament so far. You could see that Uganda has just not batted at all. I know it's small sample size and everything, but they're 60% worse in the power play than we would expect. 40% basically there. And when they get to the death, it's usually their tail. So that's almost unfair. But, you know, they're bowling. They're not great with the new ball, but they do pull it back a little bit in the middle. And they have actually bowled okay at the death at times. New Zealand have just lost a lot of wickets in the middle in their games. And you can see here their bowling hadn't gone particularly the way that they would have wanted it to so far. And this was a game that really was over here. You know, when Bolt goes on one, he's absolutely magnificent. We saw him in the IPL play beautifully with the new ball. I don't think, did any team get him for above 8 runs in the first over of an IPL game? And maybe it was one time. That first over, he's just absolutely incredible. And then they had one. And Uganda just need wickets in hand, right? They need that, and they never really got it. Waswa and Fred, they've got Fred and a Frank, don't they? I love it. I love a Fred and a Frank. You know, both of those guys got to around 10, which is about what you would expect any of those players to get. So Trent Bolt starts it. Tim Southey keeps chipping away with his wickets. A 3 for 4 there. Ridiculous figures. Santner and Ravindra both bowl well, and Lockie Ferguson, you kind of expect him to do slightly better, but it doesn't matter. Both of these teams are gone. And then New Zealand, it was really interesting that Finn Allen batted so poorly or struggled so much on that particular wicket and couldn't get the ball away. It's a fun little map, isn't it? And Ravindra was down to bat at first drop, but none of this really matters all that much anymore. And there was a wicket. So let's have a look at this group. The two teams have already qualified, Afghanistan and the West Indies, which means that, go back on my other thing I was looking at. So that means that those two teams are playing at the end. So they've both managed to qualify without actually playing against each other. They both won 5 on the trot, including some warm-up games and everything else coming in. So fascinating game just from that point of view. And I don't think it matters all that much from a, from the tournament standpoint. But it's fascinating. It will be fascinating to see how those two teams play against each other, because you look at this and you do think that there is only 2 teams in that group, and neither of them have played another good team yet, based on New Zealand's incredible form. All right, so we've got a bunch of other games. We've got India, Canada. So we can see here, India's batting has been holding up really, really good. They've been starting brilliantly in the power play on what was a very tough wicket. So it doesn't look like it on the raw numbers, but on our numbers, they've been firing. They've not been bowling well in the power play. Siraj had at least one bad time. Arshdeep's had a couple of bad games, I think, off the top of my head. But they've been pulling it back at the middle and the death without too many issues here. Canada, very much a batting side. They can get themselves into the sort of score that can cause issues in this tournament. I don't think they're going to cause any issues for India, and it doesn't matter all that much anymore anyway. But I can't see how they make enough runs from that point of view. And we are also, remember, expecting this game to be washed out. Actually, I haven't looked at the Florida weather. I'm just assuming that is what is going to happen based on everything that we've seen there so far. So then the next game is where are we? What's the one after? Oh, England, Namibia. Obviously, this is a much more important game. That game is in North Sound Antigua, which helps England massively. Because they can come in and bowl their fast bowlers and they can slog like merry men again. They will probably try and put Namibia in, but Namibia won't get bowled out. Well, I should say shouldn't get bowled out cheaply like what happened in to Oman, but probably you're looking at a score of around 140 to 160. They get towards 160 and a couple of things go their way. It could be interesting, but I don't expect that to happen. We've seen England in the power play at the moment are 80% quicker than, or 80% better than other teams. They have been losing some wickets in the middle though, and then their death has been fine. And then, that wickets in the middle would be, it's only one game, isn't it? Yeah, because the other game was washed out. And their bowling has been fine so far without being spectacular. They had one game where they were brilliant and one game where they were terrible. So again, we don't know much about them. And where's Namibia down here? So Namibia, it's funny, I've been saying for ages they're a really good bowling side. They can't bat. And they've probably even exceeded my pessimism on their batting here. But you can see outside of the middle overs, which I think they're good, they can rotate the strike quite well. They haven't been able to get any good starts and they don't score particularly good at the end. But you can see the bowling holds up. Nothing wrong with the bowling here all the way through. I think when they get to this level, their batting just doesn't have the ability to quite stand up the way that it should. Whereas at the associate level, they're much more of an equal side all the way through. And then we have Australia versus Scotland, which is the late night game. And that's in St. Lucia as well, which will give us a good view of the St. Lucia pitch. Generally, good pace, carry, good for batting traditionally. But, on this tournament, I'm expecting everyone to make 130, so it might be slightly different there. We have a look at Australia so far. Going very, very hard at the top. Similar rating to what England have at the top. They've managed to hold it a little bit more and struggle at the death. And then their bowling has been a plus all the way through. Some of this, of course, is all warped by who they've played and everything else. But it's still about form, right? Like at a certain point, putting the ball in the right area. Getting the thing to do what you want it to do. All right, that is the end of the scoreboardy part of the scoreboard for today. We'll take a quick break here, and then we will be back very, very soon for questions from you, the audience. I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that. Like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with. And also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the Empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today. All right. There's a lot of talk about Tim Payne here. I didn't even watch the Tim Payne thing, really. Not that interested about what Tim Payne says these days. Good on him. He's got a radio career and he's doing well and turning up in the media and everything. But, ex-players, who cares? Not who cares. I love ex-players, but I mean... Aditya says, now that USA have qualified for the Super 8s, against which team do you think they have the best chance to win? Their group is South Africa, West Indies, England, assuming Scotland doesn't qualify. We could throw Scotland in there as well. Well, the way they're playing at the moment, they kind of feel like they could put a lot of pressure on South Africa because they could make some runs. But I don't think the South African bowling attack is where they want to go. I wonder if the West Indies, unless it's a ragging pitch, could cause them some issues. England, there's always an opportunity of making runs against England, so there's a chance there. And then if it was Scotland, I think Scotland have the ability to outscore them and have probably a better bowling lineup. So it's probably West Indies / Scotland if Scotland make it. The issue for the USA is, I think, that their team is very much set up to hit fours and sixes and not lose early wickets. The South African attack should cause them some issues there. West Indies not as much, right? Just because West Indies don't take a lot of early wickets, and then it's up to how well they play Moti in the middle and maybe Roston if he comes back, or the end of Hakil Hassan. So, I think they've got a chance there. It's also, that West Indies have Russell, Shepherd, Joseph. These are all guys that can go for runs. So I think that's probably why the matchup makes the most sense. And then England, the problem with England is I just think England is going to feast on their attack a little bit more. Not that the West Indies won't, but, England is kind of made more to do that sort of thing. Gopal says, was Nepal's bowling lethal, or South Africa's batting currently is underwhelming, irrespective of conditions? I don't think you'd say irrespective of conditions, because they have played on some remarkable pitches, two very different kinds of pitches as well. I thought Nepal's bowling was very suited to that wicket, but I'm probably the only person in the world that's watched this game twice now. And you go back and you watch it, and you do say to yourself, some pretty ordinary balls in between some brilliant balls there. I think South Africa was batting within themselves, and they didn't try and put any pressure back on Nepal. And I think if you look at the majority of their batting in this World Cup so far, they've been doing that. And it's almost cost them 4 times. Asian Frat Boy says, thoughts on Marsh potentially being sanctioned if he does a Steve Waugh 99 against Scotland? I haven't read the playing conditions, so I'm not sure if there is a sanction that can be against him. I saw a TikTok and it wasn't someone I know, so I don't know how much they had looked this up. I saw a TikTok by someone who said that they could be sanctioned for it. It's a tricky one. If you lose the game, I think there could be a sanction. I don't think there can be a sanction for just batting slow. I could be wrong with that. But my thought, knowing what I know about those sorts of things, is I don't think that is the case. I don't think that's going to matter now, though, that England have such a great net run rate. I don't think Australia's going to lose the game on purpose. I think there is a possibility Australia don't take the game very seriously, but that could be the same for, what are the, India versus Canada might be the same kind of thing. And we've got any of the others here. Who knows how seriously Sri Lanka will take the Netherlands game. New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, looks like New Zealand want to finish the tournament strong, perhaps. But you know what I mean? Even West Indies, Afghanistan, like you might have in that game where one team just goes, let's reverse our batting order and give some other guys a chance and bring in some other bowlers in case we need them later on, or rest someone and all that sort of stuff. So I don't think you can penalise Australia for going, I don't know, resting Sampa to bring in Agar, using Stoinis as a frontline bowler so that he gets more bowling, using Maxwell as a frontline bowler. Although they may not do that in St. Lucia, but Stoinis could definitely bowl some extra overs in St. Lucia. I think, doesn't that make sense? And then where are you? What, you can't rest players? And Scotland are playing good cricket, right? So I do think it's a tricky one from that point of view. If they're dropping catches on purpose, then that maybe comes back to the purview of the regulations. But I haven't gone through them deeply. I don't really expect that to happen. I expect Australia to win the game. Nizal says, as a cricket fan, I'd want Scotland in, but the best team deserves it. So if England win and get in, they certainly deserve it. May the best team get in. Yeah, I think most people think that, right? I mean, Scotland have played really good cricket, including against England for whatever it was, 9 overs or 10 overs. So they played good cricket as well. And if England get in, it will be largely on the back of beating 2 associate teams who weren't very good, right? So I think we also have to factor that in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, if you're England and you've put yourself in this position by playing poorly against Australia and bowling terribly against Australia, you are behind the 8 ball anyway in these tournaments. And that's the way it should be. There should be jeopardy, right? There's going to be a lot of people complaining when some of the weaker sides get murdered in the Super 8s. And we saw that in 2007. And that's fine. And we all understand that. And, it will probably happen because the better teams will suddenly start to really take on the associates rather than some of the cricket we've seen so far. Please see South Africa and Nepal. But realistically, where you're in a situation now where the best teams are in form playing against teams who are very good but limited, you should see that happen. But they still got through. That's how sport works, right? You can't gerrymander these things. It just is what it is. Part says, do you think it's time to get over the rain-ruining games in the ICC events? Do you think it's time to get over rain-ruining games in ICC events? And what can be done? What do you mean by get over it? I don't think we can get over rain. Rain exists. Cricket doesn't make enough money to have roof stadiums, and that's how you would stop all of this. It's very hard during a tournament to have reserve days for every game, especially the way that cricket is currently broadcast and everything else. In Florida, even if they had reserve days, they probably still wouldn't get games, right? So it's tough. It's a weird world that we are in when it comes to cricket at the moment. So not at the moment, in general. Rain's always going to play a part in our sport until we have stadiums with big old roofs on the top. That's going to happen. That's it for the scoreboard today. We've got 3 games tomorrow. Today. Oh God, is it tomorrow? What time is it in these countries? We've got 3 games coming up, and we will certainly get to them, hoping that at least a couple of them get played at the very least. And we'll be back for the scoreboard again tomorrow. I'm Jared Kimber. See you then. Sometimes you just need to take the slips out and bowl defensively. And you also need to be careful with your computer's defense as well. If you need a VPN, go Nord. NordVPN.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months and gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. So put in some dot balls and turn them into maidens via NordVPN.com/Kimber.